So
Yeah.
we're excited. We're just gonna get into Dune 2, and I don't have like questions prepared or anything. I just figured we just get to it. But I
Chit
Yep.
do.
chat.
I'll start it off with one question. What did you think of Dune 2? Dan, why don't you start?
No, but what I really appreciated about it is, as you mentioned, I haven't read all the books. I've read two of the books. I read them back when I was in high school,
Mm,
and I'm of the mind that a film doesn't have to go exactly according to every little granular detail of the book.
Mhm.
In fact, it's just impossible. No matter how
Yeah.
dedicated you are to the book, that's just not going to happen. So I'm just looking for, does it connect to the heart of what the book conveyed? And I thought it did so brilliantly. And so I really enjoyed it. It was this vast, sweeping space epic. It had, and actually, it's kind of cool because Herbert explores so many interesting themes through his world that he creates. I mean, I just loved the movie, the feel of it, the cinematography, the acting. I mean, I just, it was something I just thoroughly enjoyed being immersed in, which is rare for now because it's rare to find just really good storytelling anymore.
Gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Um, I so a couple hours before we went and saw two, we rewatched the first one.
Yes.
Um, which in retrospect, I honestly kind of wish I hadn't done that. I wish I'd just let the last time I'd seen the first part just be the last time I saw it and just
Mm,
Mm.
go into two with that memory. Because it was very like, and we also saw it in IMAX, so it was
Mm.
very like jarring. Afterwards, I was just kind of like Roman, my husband's like, "Did you like it?" I'm like, like, I'm just like, all I could say is like, "It was good." Yeah, like it was good.
yeah.
But yeah, I so part one, like I had read the first Dune book shortly before the movie came out. The first part one came out, and I was absolutely floored and blown away by part one. I was like, this is the best book to movie adaptation I have ever seen in my life. Like, as you know, Dan, like you were saying, it's like pretty much impossible to do it exactly because it's just two totally different
Yeah.
storytelling mediums. Part one was so good of an adaptation, and
Mm,
I felt like part two like didn't necessarily live up to my expectations in that aspect. Like I felt like it still did a good job of portraying the important things. They changed a good bit more
Mhm.
from book to movie for part two than they did for part one. But I felt like it was still like, you know, it was for the sake of the story and it all made sense. I think they made good decisions, but it was still, I think I was kind of like a little bit let down in some ways with that. Um, Overall, it was freaking awesome. I mean, the soundtrack was is insane. I think maybe for my taste, part 2, it was so much action,
Mm.
um, and so that I think probably overwhelmed me a good bit, especially comparing it because I had just seen part 1 and then going to part 2, I was like, "Wow, this is intense, like,
Yeah.
nonstop, like, wow." But yeah, overall enjoyed it. Just have a few things that weren't my favorite, but it was
mm.
amazing still. Yeah. What about you, Micah?
I'm a mix between both Dan and Rachel. I second like pieces of all of both of them. Just with Dan, as you said, like it pretty much captured the same essence of what it should be, and I agree with that. I think the things that and again, the changes that they made to it were stuff that I and still enjoyed. I still enjoyed
Yeah.
the experience mostly, except for being in an IMAX theater. And I don't know if it's just our San Antonio IMAX of blasting the volume to where you need to get like a doctor's appointment like, with an ear
Yeah.
doctor the next day, because
Yeah,
that is
it was a
genuinely
lot.
how I felt. I would not recommend seeing it in IMAX. The picture is amazing, but for my ears and that
Yeah, it
experience,
was a
it
lot.
almost
It
took
was harsh.
away from the experience with how loud it was and how
Hmm.
constantly intense it was. I found myself getting progressively just annoyed and irked cynical throughout the experience because of just how jarring it was. I actually said to myself at the Harkonnen arena scene, I was like, I could walk out right now. And that was sad. And that I blame just the theater experience of it being too much for me to bear. And that's just my personal, that's not even a
Mhm.
critique or anything on the movie. That was just because of the environment that we watched it in. But watching it a second time today definitely helped. And just
Nice.
being able to take it in,
Yeah.
and, it was
Yeah.
watching it a second time today was great, and especially I had a similar experience with Rachel with watching it back to back, Dune
Mm.
Part 1 and then going to see it in IMAX, Dune Part 2. It almost felt like 2 different directors,
Hmm.
using the same property just because of the experience was very polarizingly different. But at the same time, it's like a sequel should have a different experience to kind of keep things fresh. It was the characters were great. I thought that Chani was freaking excellent.
Oh my gosh, they
Chani and
did so
Feyd-Rautha
well.
would be my
Oh my
highlights of
gosh,
this.
Austin Butler, man.
Yeah.
What a
was was
freaking
awesome. And
wow.
I mean, and
Yeah.
everyone was awesome. Even Jessica, like Lady Jessica was phenomenal. Her
Mhm.
deliveries and her screen presence. Almost every character has just such incredible screen presence.
The casting was
And
exceptional, I think, to that
amazing.
Casting was
end.
Oh
insane.
yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah,
was, you know,
Amazing.
yeah,
Every
absolutely
single
amazing.
person is just a stellar actor.
Yep.
That's cool.
I feel like every character carries the scene that they're in, which is funny to say because it's like you have
Mm.
multiple characters in the same scene. So it's like,
right.
but it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
doesn't feel like one person overpowers the other. It just feels like everyone shines in their role. And
Yeah.
Mm.
so it's definitely
Mm.
it's an epic experience, and um it's a very engaging sci-fi action movie. In summary, the places where it falls short for me is that that's not what I look for to experience from Dune.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's just where it falls short for me, is that it felt like it was just in the same ballpark as other sci-fi action, engaging and thrilling and exciting sci-fi movies. It has the set dressing of Dune, of sandworms, of Arrakis, and the narrative that is really engaging, and the Kwisatz Haderach and Lisan Gaib, and it has
Denny. Yes.
Director Denny's vision, which is so immersive and beautiful and stunning. It has all that stuff, and then Hans Zimmer's score, right? It has Hans Zimmer's music,
Ugh.
and it's just
Yeah.
Mm.
such a plus. Such
Yeah.
a it makes it all like this franchise is like the new Lord of the Rings of our time, basically, in a
Yeah.
sci-fi vein, you know. So
Yeah.
so the places where it falls short for me was it not feeling as character driven. And I should have expected that, honestly, because there were comments from Denny before the release that he was like, part one was sort of laying the groundwork, and then part two will just be about,
The
having more
action.
fun and the action and stuff like that. So that was, he set that expectation. I just didn't read into it that way. I just didn't
Yeah.
think of it in
Sure.
that sense. Uh, but yeah, I miss the things that made part one so much more meaningful to me, really gripping, and like, my gosh, this is my favorite movie in the world, and it's so flawless. Was all the character moments and the pacing.
Mm.
And so this one had more action than I could care for, but it was still fun, especially seeing it a second time. I was like, this is fun, you know.
I mean, it didn't feel overdone. I mean, it didn't feel like they're like, "Hey, let's insert a action scene here just because we have
For no
5 action
reason.
scenes that we
Yeah.
have to do."
Yeah,
It felt like
yeah,
it moved and advanced the story and kind of
yeah.
tied up some of the loose ends and gave you some satisfying ends, in particular to the
Mhm.
Harkonnens. Um, Even though
That,
that part of
yeah,
that was even done a little bit differently from the book, which is sort of
yeah,
interesting. But yeah,
yeah.
I mean, that was, there was a lot of satisfaction, I think, in the second one for that reason.
That's
What do you
actually,
think,
Cool.
Issa?
Cool.
yes, Issa, you go.
Yeah.
I actually we actually me and Dan and a few others we watched Dune 1 probably a week before we watched Dune
Mhm.
2. Our theater experience that sucks about the IMAX being super
Yeah.
loud.
It's so
Um
Yeah.
bad.
it was actually really pleasant for me to view it and to see it in the big screen. I
Awesome.
did wish I was seated back further, so
Yeah.
this second time around I went further back and it was great.
So good. So much better. Yeah. Same with us. Like when we went this afternoon, we were like, this is so much nicer.
Yeah, yeah. I honestly like I love Dune 1.
Oh
Um
my gosh.
I have like see, and it's so funny too
It
because
is
I've
flawless.
I've seen a lot of comments about how this is better than Dune 1. And then I've seen uh comments the other way around. And it's like, well, you can't have Dune 1 and have Dune 2,
Exactly.
and you can't have Dune 2 without Dune 1, right? And so
Yeah.
Yeah.
you need the groundwork for the characters and everything that happened in
Mhm.
Dune 1 in order to have what happened in Dune 2. And so I kind of went in I didn't go in with really any expectations except for all
Mhm.
the hype. And and obviously what I saw with trailers and some of the images that were posted online before the release, I was excited to just see Lady Jessica and her
Ugh.
uh her arc and her transformation, and Paul too. Like in one he was there was so much doing two too there's so much struggle between with taking on that.
Mantle.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
better, yes. And I loved the interaction with him and his dad. And I kind of, you know I felt like I almost wanted to see flashbacks of some of those key moments.
Leo and yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, some of those key
Mhm.
moments that kind of brought some other moments that happened in Dune 2 kind of full circle. And
Yeah.
but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I walked out of there. I I felt like I was in a trance within a
Yeah.
Mm.
trance
Oh,
Yeah.
for a couple
Same.
days, honestly.
Yeah.
My experience was just I I mean, speechless, like I am right now. Like
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
even
Maybe
know.
some spice was in the theater and it just kind of got
Right?
in and
Yeah,
I inhaled some
exactly.
some spice. I
did some
definitely
stuff,
drank
you know.
some worm piss. uh,
Yeah.
Water of life, hallelujah.
Yep.
No, I really felt like, first of all, I love all, like, the casting was so
Mhm.
remarkable.
Mm.
Mhm.
And I like what you said, Micah, about like people just like the actors kind of bringing their game, but
Yep.
nobody felt like they were trying to overpower anybody else in the
Mhm.
No.
scene, or it just was so well done. And the images, I can't get over the
Yeah.
images. And I'll actually just add some here.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Mm.
That first, it wasn't even the first scene. The first scene was actually with
Gosh.
uh
Erlon, right?
wait,
She's
who was it?
narrating. Or
Yeah.
was it them
Yeah, she's
torching the
narrating.
portrait of Leto?
Yeah, like kind
Yeah.
of
It's just
going
a
through everything
montage.
that
Yeah.
Yeah,
happened.
it's a montage.
Yeah, kind of like a
Yeah.
montage.
It
And
shows
then
the
and then the
burning of
sand
the
scene.
Leto seal and or
Oh
the
my gosh.
Atreides
Yeah.
seal and yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And then that sand scene.
Yeah.
A
Mhm.
As soon as I saw the Harkonnens just kind of levitating up a mountain, I was
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
okay."
Yeah.
Which was something
About to
I
get
was like,
real.
in the theater, I leaned over to Micah. I was like, since when did everybody get this levitating technology? Because in part one, it's only the Sardaukar, which is the
Well,
Emperor's
and
Mm,
Baron
soldiers.
Harkonnen, I mean, that's how he elevates his fatness is
Oh, I
he's got
guess,
like
yeah,
those
that's
little
true.
Yeah.
that's
propulsion
true.
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
No,
That's
didn't
true,
think of
that's
that.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I didn't
just
even
thought
think
of
of that,
that.
yeah.
I was just thinking of the soldiers, and I was like, they definitely could not do that in part one. Somebody got an
Well,
upgrade.
uh, it I mean, I was arrested when I saw that.
Yeah.
It's
Just
same though. At
Oh,
first,
yeah.
I was just like,
Yeah.
this is
I
the
was
coolest
like,
shot ever. Like, oh my gosh,
yeah, the cinematography in this was just insane.
so killer.
I can't get over it, honestly. And that scene was just that for me, I felt like, okay, strap in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
this is gonna
That's
be a
good stuff.
ride. And yeah, I kind of was just like, okay, this is that's insane.
here
I
we go.
That's just you got my attention, and now I'm ready to go.
Yeah,
Yeah, Dune
So,
has a feeling of like if you go to an art gallery and you see a brilliant photographer's work displayed on the walls,
mm,
they just seem to be doing like where every shot was like that, and then it just strung together and created movement. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
many of the pictures just had this sweeping vista. It just the way they
Yeah.
captured it. It reminded me a lot of Japanese cinematography, where it's
Mm.
just very rich in its visual splendor and majesty.
Poetic.
Just
Yeah.
it's like everything is art, and you're just watching moving art.
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah.
Really liked it a lot.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
the
that was
visuals are just out of this world. Like, so insane.
Who was the cinematographer on this film?
Greg Fraser,
That sounds right.
Did he do part 1 as well? You know?
I believe so.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
definitely has the same kind of feel. Do any of you know what he's done prior to this?
The Batman, the creator, Rogue One.
Oh, the Batman. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
The Batman has
Nice.
insane cinematography.
Like Matt Reeves'
Amazing.
Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. And the creator, I don't know if you guys saw that. I saw that and I was actually quite surprised in a good way. And I thought it was visually stunning. And they filmed that on a Sony camera, like a $4,000 Sony camera. They filmed that
Wow.
Hmm.
sci-fi.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
nuts. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
One of
he did that and then he did Rogue One.
nice.
Wow. So he's definitely got quite the filmography.
Hmm.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure.
One of my favorite like takeaways or themes from the whole, not just part 2, but the entire like part 1 and part 2 together, the whole overall story is just and I think it's the Reverend Mother who said it to Lady Jessica. She's like, "You of all people should know there are no sides," and I loved that like tying into, so there's the prophecy that the Bene Gesserit have planted for centuries, and these people that believe it, there's these fundamentalists, and they're right, like they're right in for believing in this prophecy. But then Chani and the people who think it's all a bunch of BS and just a way to control them and manipulation and all this kind of stuff, like they're right too. So it's like both sides are right, but like
It's not a right or a wrong side.
it, yeah, there's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really appreciated that theme of just there's not necessarily a right or wrong side. There's just there's multiple ways to look at the same thing. I personally really appreciate that theme.
Herbert does that a lot. I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
in his I mean, whether it's the man versus nature thing, and he's, using that as the Fremen as the example of how part of it is them adapting to nature, and then part of it is them harnessing nature, or the religious aspect. I mean, he
Yeah.
kind of introduces, I mean, if you think about it, you have a lot of competing factions.
Yeah.
You've got the emperor who's and each competing faction is sort of not just competing against one another, but they also have their own separate agenda.
Hmm.
Like the Spice Guild has one agenda, the Harkonnens have an agenda, the various houses, even though they do kind of like House Atreides, they have their own agenda. The emperor has his own agenda. Then you have the Fremen and the religious fervor that's kind of hovering just below the surface. And then you have the Bene Gesserit, and they've got, I mean, it's just there's a lot of moving parts in it,
Yeah.
and it makes for a very interesting study of different things that kind of Herbert does, and I really like that. It's just it's a lot deeper than sort of your typical sci-fi,
Yeah.
Yes.
And
which I think
gosh,
is what
Paul's
lends
whole
so much strength
journey.
to the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Paul's whole journey is just absolutely insane, from, this little boy in part 1 who's like begging his father, please, like, let me go with the advance team to Arrakis, like, please let me do something. And then, that great scene in the graveyard ensues, with him and Leto, to freaking where we left him now, with starting a holy war knowingly, and
I
leaving
love
it
that.
knowingly.
I love
Yeah.
that part when he's on top of the dune and he just sort of he's talking to himself and he's like, I found my way, Father.
Yep.
Mm,
And I love the way that was like a callback to the
so
first.
good.
It was
Yep.
Yeah.
so good.
Oh my gosh.
So good.
So good.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting exploration of power because, you know, you have, I mean, the Harkonnens obviously look at power as a club to be beaten, to beat your enemies with. And
Yeah.
then you have the Bene Gesserit who, you know, they sort of have their own version of power that's beyond sort of everybody else. They've got their own game going.
Yeah.
But you've also have the power of Paul, like as he's coming to his own.
Yeah.
Leto sort of represents the noble use of power, but even Leto, this doesn't come out as much in the movie as it does in the books, but Leto even realizes, as noble as he is, there are certain uses of power that have to be exercised in order to just get things done.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
I love how Herbert
Yeah.
just looks at all these facets of power, not just the use of it, but ultimately kind of the unsettling question of, so is there any possible power that people can use appropriately, or is it all in the end mismanaged, but it's just a matter of degree?
Or
Right.
time. Yep.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is kind of the Fremen perspective of power. Almost.
Yeah.
I mean, they eventually, you know, whip themselves up into a war frenzy once their Messiah arrives. But
Yeah.
they're more of the, I mean, they're not really even pacifists, but they're just defending, you know.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
defending
even
and
that's the work of the Bene Gesserit
oh
that's been
yeah,
planted over the
totally.
centuries.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's now coming
Yeah.
to fruition in the Kwisatz Haderach, you know. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I love what's his name? Stilgar. Just they son
The son of
okay.
Gaib.
As written,
As it is written. As
The
I know
the
everything. He always
Mahdi is too
this is
humble.
interpretive framework for everything.
totally.
The
This is
Mahdi is
good.
too humble to admit he's the Mahdi, even more
Clearly,
reason
he's the
that he
Messiah.
is.
That proves it.
Yep.
And then you know, juxtaposed with Chani's like, you want to control people, give them a Messiah, and they'll wait for centuries.
Mm,
Yep.
Yeah.
Just like
yeah.
such great different sides of the spectrum there.
Yep.
I think it's interesting that, you know, that's one of the areas where they moved away from. Oh, that's such a good quote.
Yeah, I was gonna segue into this quote, but go
That's
ahead,
my favorite
Dan.
quote ever. Oh, I love that. That's one of the things, you know, Shawnee's a much more disruptive character in the movie than she is in the books.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
And so that's kind of an interesting, again,
Mhm.
I feel like even though there are clear distinctions between the book and the movie, and those distinctions are sharper in the second Dune than the first, it still holds true to the
Still holds
core
true.
of the
Yeah.
story. So I'm fine with, you
Yep.
know, what the changes that they're making, because it's
Yeah.
the core of it, the heart of it is kept intact. So, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I wanted to talk about this quote because it's so good.
Yes.
Yes.
And every time I think of it, every time I hear it, I just go, man, it's such a good
Mhm.
quote. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
it was so sad, obviously, when he died. But I just wanted to bring back some old images of him because he
Yeah.
just was so.
It
It's
was
funny, like
amazing.
some of the characters that have died in one and two
Mm,
have made such strong impressions, and you're just like,
Yeah.
I
Yep.
yeah.
wish that didn't happen, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That was
but
something I will say that I missed from part 1 into part 2, was I felt like part 1 was just had these extremely, like, excellent well, number 1, I appreciated, there was a lot of time to, like, breathe given to you, but, you know, there's these several
Mhm.
minute long montages throughout the movie with, you know, music playing and this and that, and I appreciate I liked that a lot, and obviously
Mhm.
part 2 is way more actiony, so you didn't necessarily get that same experience, but I also
Yeah.
really miss I felt like there wasn't as many deep, meaningful, like, character moments, um, as there
Mm.
were in part 2 as there were in part 1. Like that scene between Paul and his father. The scene in the tent with Paul and Jessica after they've escaped, where he's, freaking out and Jessica's comforting him, and telling him, who he is. And so I feel like there's, and even just Paul running up to Duncan, Idaho, both times he, sees him, and he picks him up and, hugs him, and there's like funny little exchanges there. I feel like there was just so many like really powerful, character revealing, rooted, real moments in part 1, and I don't necessarily feel the same way about part 2. Like there were great interchanges between characters, and like there were several sweet moments with Paul and Shawnee, but that was, none of them felt as weighty to me as the moments in part 1, and so I think that was something that I particularly really missed. It just felt a lot more plot driven than part 1 did. So
I think it's really impressive when you can care about a character and it's not done gratuitously. Like for example, you watch a movie and there's a dad and his wife and daughter are killed, and so now this mild-mannered, accountant is suddenly this deadly assassin who tracks down everybody that's on this. I mean, it doesn't have that gratuitous kind of color by number sort of. It was done very well. It felt very real, and I think that's one of the things that is a challenge when you're dealing with a sci-fi movie, is how do you anchor something so futuristic in a feeling that you can relate to now. And I can't explain exactly how it was done. I just know that's how it felt. It felt like you were stepping into this world. It was very immersive. And you're in that world and you're experiencing the world as the characters were experiencing it, and you're walking their journey with them. And that's just, to me, I just think that's great storytelling,
Can we talk about the cinematography?
Oh yeah, for real. Well, here's the problem. I don't think I have words.
One of my favorite.
You have a picture?
Yeah.
Maybe we should just use emojis to describe our.
Like,
I love it. I mean, the costume, the cinematography.
Gosh.
Oh gosh. I mean,
one of my favorite scenes or shots from part 2 is it's when Paul is arriving in the South, and it's a top-down shot of him moving through the crowd. And oh my gosh, is one of my favorite shots in the whole film.
Gosh, and Jessica's whole like Reverend Mother ensemble there. In that bottom left. There's the shot. Damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
Wow.
The scale is amazing.
Just incredible.
So good.
And you, Micah, you mentioned Jessica.
Yeah, on the previous one that you had. And the bottom.
Oh yeah.
Right. Just like her. They've executed things so well in this in these two movies, just with
the fabrics and
they communicate so much without the dialogue or the actors acting, But even like gosh, like just like there's so much communicated in the wardrobe and in the makeup, the facial tattoos.
Although that one's misspelled, but I don't want to quibble. But
gosh, wow. I do miss. I have to say, I do miss that in the books, Jessica was still motherly to Paul. I'm okay with the change just because it creates
she was pretty
really
gnarly
riveting experience. She was really gnarly. She was just manipulative.
Manipulative Bene Gesserit.
Manipulative Bene
Gesserit. Not a mom.
after she took the water of life, which I mean, and that partially still happens. I feel like in the book, but there were still moments where she was still motherly to Paul.
Yeah.
Gosh, her acting in that scene.
Micah, that's a good point. It's a good point.
Yeah.
but on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know how they would kind of bring that in. I felt like they
There's no
tried
time
to
for
with
it.
moments here and there,
Yeah.
but that's
There
like one of those
wasn't
tough it's tough to navigate.
in the direction that they chose to go with, there was no screen time to savor that, I would think.
Yeah.
And plus it seems like they needed to they needed Jessica to fill the appropriate position with the changes to her
Mm,
character to drive the story in the direction that they wanted it to go.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's
for sure.
based off of the direction that they chose to go with for part 2 and for Jessica's character and the role they wanted her to fill.
Yeah.
Um, that's how they wrote her
Yeah.
for the adaptation, and it was still super
Oh,
compelling.
yeah. It was awesome.
So yeah, and this scene, as Rachel was stating, her
Yeah,
acting on the
her
transformation
acting.
blew my mind. And
Oh,
seeing it a second time today, I was like, did they use CGI? Did they do something to like just like
Seriously, to her
slightly
face.
contort her
yeah,
face,
her
her
face
eyes? Like I
is
was just like,
yeah,
how is that humanly possible? I
yeah,
felt like, or just
yeah,
it
Literally.
seemed like parts of
Yeah.
her facial structure and muscles were like, or
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like
yeah,
she
it was
instantly developed bags
yes,
Yeah, bags, and
yes,
it
and
seemed like,
veins.
I
yeah,
don't know, like the corners of her forehead were like
Oh, yeah.
it
it
was
was
No.
like
crazy.
Just that
crazy.
scene alone,
Yeah.
she should get nominated just for that
She
scene.
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
agreed.
And she
Like,
had a lot of standout scenes. I mean, every time
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
she entered the picture, she had this commanding performance.
Yep,
Like,
yes,
and sometimes she wasn't saying a thing. Like it was just in her
mhm,
eyes. And
yep.
I was
Dude,
just like
everyone was
the
acting.
entire time I was thinking,
Yep.
listen, the Oscar landscape would have been way different, I think, if this film actually came out when it was scheduled to come out, which
Ah,
was
mm,
back in the fall,
yeah,
yeah,
early fall. I think it's September or something like
November,
that.
yeah,
November?
yeah.
it was
Oh
November
yeah,
3rd.
because the strike kind of
Yeah,
Pushed
uh
it. Yep,
the
I
Yeah.
think it
yeah.
was November 3rd anyway.
yeah.
I said that very confidently. I think it was November
I
3rd.
think it was November.
You you can
Yeah.
Google it.
Yeah.
And I think it would have changed. I would think it would have changed a lot of things for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah,
In terms of award, like the award season would definitely be a bit different.
yeah,
Um yeah.
I was gonna
Gosh, I
say
can't even.
every one of these actors can act with their eyes so
Mhm.
well,
For sure.
yeah,
and
Yeah.
especially for like the Fremen roles, like with Stilgar and
Oh yeah.
Chani and Paul.
yeah,
There's certain scenes where that's all they have to
Yeah.
communicate because they
yeah,
have their face covered, and it's
Yeah.
yeah.
phenomenal. Cha This is Zendaya's best role I've ever seen. It was not I didn't see Zendaya for any second of it. I was like, I don't this is
This is
another
Johnny.
person.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is another
Yeah.
person. This is a totally different character. Because I felt like sometimes
Yeah.
her performances, and this isn't even a criticism on acting at all. Most actors are what I would classify as performers, not actors, in the sense that a lot take The Rock for the worst, worst example here is that he just plays
The
himself.
Rock.
He
Yeah.
performs as himself in his
Mm,
characters. They cast him to perform as himself, and that's the
on
character
camera.
that he's
Yeah,
written for on
Right.
camera. So a lot of actors, and a lot of people will criticize these actors, and like Tom Cruise being one of them. It's like, oh, it's Tom Cruise playing Tom Cruise, and
Right.
it's like, yeah,
This
okay.
is Gary Oldman
Are
who
you confident to be
absorbs
on
into whatever
camera
he's
as
doing.
yourself though? So,
yeah. Who can become a
it's
different
there's certain
person? Yeah,
yeah, and then there's actors that become totally different people, and so I felt like, just previous
yeah.
and I haven't seen a lot of Zendaya's work. It's mostly her, it's mostly, I mean, really, I could summarize it pretty fast right now. It's pretty much Greatest Showman and Marvel
Mm,
Spider-Mans. I don't
mm.
know what else that I have seen her in movie-wise.
Movie-wise?
Um, yeah. I've
She was
seen a
in a
little
show
bit
that
of
Leonard used to
Euphoria.
watch. Like these girls were like dancers or something.
Oh, yeah, the Shake It Up from
Yeah, yeah,
Disney
there we go.
Channel.
Disney
Yeah,
Channel.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I feel like she showed a lot of growth in
Hmm.
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Showed a lot of growth. because she disappeared. It did not. I
Yep.
was like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
Me saying this as if
Yeah,
I even know
gosh.
who Zendaya is.
And man, Austin Butler as well. Like that
Yeah.
guy, like
I
from
was just gonna
El
transition here.
even just Elvis and this, like those
Yeah.
two roles, he disappeared in Elvis and he completely disappeared in this. And like meaning into the character that he was playing. The actor Austin Butler, I was just wow. Like he was phenomenal and is
Wow.
incredible. And the voices that he can do as well, like the Elvis accent he had to put
Mhm.
on, this like sort of strange, like guttural way he
Hmm.
was speaking the whole time.
Yeah.
He
Feyd-Rautha.
looks like a ing psychopath.
Yep.
Like
Yeah. I think he pretty
terrifying.
much encapsulated Feyd-Rautha very well.
Yes.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Very
Uh,
sinister and
And I
menacing.
oh, sinister. I loved just how they
Gosh.
Micah didn't like it, but I loved how they showcased his psychopathy, like with his first introduction of just like being like, let me test my knife by literally murdering two people right now.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, you know what was good about that? Like this is the movie is very measured in things, which I think creates an even greater impact. Like one of the most chilling scenes of oh, the movie about Schindler's List was of all the horrific stuff going on, there's they pull this guy out of the factory just arbitrarily, and they force this Jewish man to his knees, and they're gonna put a bullet in his head, and then the gun jams, and then they're sitting there arguing over the mechanisms of the gun while this guy is just
oh
weeping
my gosh.
because his
Yeah.
Yeah.
life's on the line. And it's just
Yeah.
like, it's almost it's the casual disregard that's
Yeah.
so
Yep.
chilling.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of what makes him so menacing is it's not even like he's doing that. Like he's testing the sharpness in a human being's neck the way you or I would swat a fly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He's not even being mean or overly evil, or he's just
Yeah.
it's the
He has
casualness,
no
you know?
regard for
It's just
life.
like,
Yeah.
oh, whoa. It's like,
Which
Yeah.
what I'll say is that that would have landed as more that would have communicated that effect better to me if we didn't have previous on-screen senseless killings from Raban with outlashing.
well,
And
he's a very different character.
yeah,
Like
I
the
get
whole point
yeah,
of him
yeah.
is he's like this
He does
blunt
it in a different
instrument of
motivation.
wrath,
Yeah.
brainless, brute, you know.
Yep.
Right.
It took the
Mm.
for me because we had all the instances of him every time he was on screen beforehand, he was killing somebody senselessly and recklessly. And it comes from a different motivation, but it just took away. It was like, oh, killing the person right next to me because. And then
This
the
guy.
next time we see Raban,
Yeah.
killing the person right next to me because. And then by the time you get to Feyd-Rautha, who is killing two people right next to him because it just doesn't land with as much. It's like the repetitiveness of Cena, even though it's rooted in two different, coming from two different places for the characters. Raban is frustrated and is angry, and Fade is just like casual. But it was just the progression of seeing it. It was just like, here we go again, just killing the next two people standing next to me. Like that point didn't get communicated to me of Fade and Feyd-Rautha's psychoticness didn't I didn't feel it until he was in the arena because of the way
Mm.
that he was reacting and like slithering
Yeah.
Dude.
Mm.
I mean, it's hard
his
too because the
enemies
whole
and
Harkonnen culture is so barbaric. It's
yeah,
so ruthless. It's so without conscience
yep,
that, how do you stand out? You know,
right,
it's like,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. When he was laughing at the knife in his face, that's when I felt him being psychotic. I was like, "Oh my god."
Yeah.
He's not just laughing. He's laughing like a child. He is
Yeah.
giggling like a child with a knife in his face and then just like the different expressions that come in his face. I'm like, that's when I felt his being psychotic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because previously all the pointless deaths just felt like I don't know, fodder for making the villains feel evil on screen. Um, And partially I had an issue with that. This is me talking from my experience of seeing it in IMAX back to back from seeing Dune Part 1. And so Dune Part 1, so watching Dune 1 and then watching Dune Part 2, there were these repetitive occurrences, not just with the Harkonnens, but elsewhere. But I just remember it standing out to me with the Harkonnens. It was like, the point of this is to teach me that the Harkonnens are evil. I already know the Harkonnens are evil. I don't need any more screen time spent on them doing that.
They
and,
wiped
and,
out
and
an
I
entire
see it as
planet.
taking screen time away from other things, because you have limited screen time to communicate your story. And then the other one was the Fremen being oppressed. Like, I remember the opening scene of the Harkonnen soldiers
Mm.
tracking down the Stilgar and Paul and then Jessica. That scene,
Yeah.
I remember afterwards I was like, okay, so the point of this, I mean, was to expose us to the Fremen's, how they survive. But
Right.
then ultimately, I was like, it's just to remind us that the Fremen are oppressed by the Harkonnens. And I'm like, I already know that the Fremens are oppressed by the Harkonnens. Why are we wasting screen time on reminding us that the Fremen are oppressed by the Harkonnens? That was the
But
whole
I
premise.
appreciate
Yeah,
that screen time though, just because I was like, "Let's
right.
strap in."
Yeah,
But no,
yeah, and it
I
was
get
one
it.
of those moments. Yep, for sure.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and I think, and I felt that more and better. Well, then not that I do remember feeling that, especially when they ascended. I was like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
it was, but the length of it, and then afterwards, and leaving the theater, I was like, why did they do that? It didn't feel like it really served much purpose. And I was like, it was kind of just a reminder. And then, but seeing it
Yeah,
again today,
probably.
I felt more of the intensity again. Um,
Yeah.
so, and it made more sense to me between seeing it in IMAX and then seeing it just today. I'd seen
Mm.
this post on Instagram, which who knows how trustworthy sources are, but whatever, I don't care. So,
Yeah.
but Denny was basically, apparently, Denny was saying that like he approached Dune Part 2 for it to be autonomous, where it kind of can stand on its own foot, and you don't need to see Part 1 to see Part 2. It would help, but you can see
Yeah,
Part
sure.
2 for the first time, and then
Right.
see Part 1 if you didn't get around to seeing Part 1 yet. And so um, I'd seen that post, and then seeing it again today. There were decisions with the dialogue and with entire sequences of either characters, of reintroduction of characters and narrative, that I was like, this makes sense.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
it almost, and it weirdly Dune Part 2 almost is, for myself, I would judge it as, I would judge it as being like a better movie as a standalone movie, which is funny because it's a continuation of Part 1. Um,
Right.
just because it's two polarly different experiences from Part 1 to Part 2, which
Mm.
Denny was upfront about that. He was like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we did the character and the groundwork. Part 2 is going to be about jumping
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
action and all that.
I don't really
Uh,
Yeah.
see part two as a standalone. I mean, I appreciate the sentiment
right.
that he apparently was trying to accomplish there, but
Yep.
I mean, I'm a big context person, so there's so many questions I would have had that I would have had no answers to watching the second one if I hadn't watched the first.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
But you know
I
what? If it's
loved
on the
too.
ground, it's got to be true. So yeah.
Yeah. I loved too getting to spend more time with the Bene Gesserit, and seeing
Yeah.
more of their, shadow government work in action.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because when we watched part one, I, I was trying to, we watched it with a group of people, and there was, I think, four people who had never seen it before. And I was just hoping that they were understanding the
Mm.
Bene Gesserit's hand in everything, because and but I was like, part of me was like, gosh, they aren't necessarily like super clear with this
Hmm.
in part one, and
Yeah.
um, so I loved
Mm.
that part two had so much more of
Of
that,
that.
just because it's the reason that Paul even exists and becomes
Right.
the Kwisatz Haderach. Um,
Right.
So
I was
I
gonna,
love
because
that.
both of you have read the book, because
Mhm.
I have not read it since high school, so it's been a minute.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't remember Feyd-Rautha impregnating the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah, Margot
I don't
Fenring
think.
has a totally
Yeah.
different role and presence
She.
in the book,
Mhm.
and that does not take place. She and her husband
Oh,
The
spectates
match. Yeah.
the gladiator battle.
Feyd-Rautha's
Yeah,
match. Yeah.
Yeah.
Feyd-Rautha's gladiator battle.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that doesn't take place. The role is different, and honestly, Rachel and I were like, we were like, we remembered what it wasn't, you know?
Right.
But
Right.
what were Count and Lady Fenring's role in the book? And we were like, we really don't remember. We remember that they were
Yeah.
present and spectating, and then they
Yeah.
were present at the very end,
At the final fight
when the Emperor
between
was
Feyd.
Well,
there
I think
Yeah.
on
Fenring was
Arrakis and stuff like that. But we were like, they were present, which
in the
means they
book.
were
Was it
probably setting up
Fenring?
Messiah. But yeah,
I thought Fenring in the book, could be totally wrong. I'm like, but I thought he was going to assassinate Paul, and then they kind of had this minute where they didn't.
you know what? That feels vaguely familiar.
No, or actually,
Yeah.
or was it Fenring, or was it another character? It was basically, it was the guy that was the Mentat, and
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I know who you're
Peter
talking about.
or
It was
Peter.
no,
no, I
Pieter,
think
he dies. This
Pieter.
was
Oh right.
yeah, this
Oh
is
yeah. The other
the other
Mentat. What
one,
was his name?
because
Thufir
basically
Hawat.
Paul's being trained as a he's trained as a Mentat.
So
Um,
Thufir and Gurney, I can't remember if it was either of which one of these two characters, but there's a subplot in the book where they believe Jessica was behind the assassination of
yes, yes,
Duke
and it takes a
Leto.
Gurney.
little
When
while to
Gurney.
convince
It
them
takes a
that
Yeah.
little
he
while
wasn't.
for them to, yeah, and I think Gurney tries to like almost tries to kill Jessica.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a subplot that
Really?
they
Yeah.
yeah, so that's a subplot that was in the
There was
book.
a lot of subplots
Um,
in the
yeah,
book that didn't make it
yeah.
into the movie.
Which and like those
And
are such brilliant when it comes to making a film adaptation for a book, it was like
yeah.
taking that out is such a like
One.
it's such a brilliant thing to take out because the show still goes on.
yeah,
Nothing's
Yeah.
necessarily like missed as far as
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
overarching story. And
right.
that's just like the decision to do that was awesome
Yeah, like an
for
interesting diversion, but it's
part
not
one.
essential.
Yeah, it wasn't
One
essential.
one other
Yeah.
one that if meaning there's a lot of subplots that got left out purely because of the way they changed the timeline from the book. But
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yep.
one that they could have slipped in and still kept the timeline the same way they do for the movie of part two is and it would have been a really cool peek I think into the Fremen culture is in the book whenever Paul kills Jameis he
Yes,
then has to take on Jameis's role in society so he
hmm,
Yeah.
has a wife and two children
He
right.
has to
um
take care of,
that he has to
Yep.
right?
take care of
Yep.
and
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah
Yeah.
and he essentially becomes like fills Jameis's role in that way and we that would have been a really neat even if it was barely on screen I feel
Like
like
2
it could
yeah.
have
minutes of
been a
establishing
neat
screen time.
touch to
Yeah.
have kept that
That's
just
see,
to
that's a
add
good
to
point, a really good point. Because I remember when they were showing in the first one, they were showing these flashbacks of Jameis essentially acting as Paul's
Yep.
desert mentor,
Paul's guide
Yeah.
and
yep
you think that, oh, okay, there, and then it was, and instead
And
of
then
that first battle being one that Paul refuses to kill him, and then Jameis nurses a grudge for a while, and then finally challenges him to a battle, and then Paul kills him for good. Instead
yep
of that process happening, you kind of get the feel like he's Paul's desert mentor when actually Chani is one that takes that role on,
Yep.
mm,
both in the book and in the movie
Yep.
predominantly. Um, and so it was kind of like, and like you said, Rachel, they completely removed that part out where Paul either becomes her husband or she becomes his servant, one of the two. That's
yeah
eliminated entirely. And I don't know. I mean, like, but I'm fine with them taking that out because again, it
yeah
stays true to the heart of the book. But yeah, I agree. Like,
it
I
would have
could
been
live
cool.
on
It
it.
would have been cool to have that in there, I think.
Yeah, because it
yeah
goes a little
It's
bit
just
on the
different.
Fremen culture. You get a
Yeah,
little
Yeah.
for
bit
sure.
more insight into that, and I don't know.
yep yeah
I'm gonna let's
oh
talk
Override.
about
that's
the
what I was
third
gonna
act.
bring up next yes
Ooh,
Yes.
Third act.
gosh Oh, so
Blessed,
good.
blessed be. Ah,
Man.
this scene was intense,
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah. A little bit,
Yeah.
yeah.
truly.
And we
Um,
Kwisatz Haderach is in full MFN
For
force.
real. Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, and then he goes into calls everyone battle, goes into battle. It
Yeah.
just becomes just a crazy, gnarly
Yep.
situation.
Yeah. I
This,
love his cloak that they have him wearing when he's
Mhm.
walking in.
oh yeah,
When he's walking through the people and there's that shot of him from ground level and he's got the hood and the cloak and he's just like, he
oh yeah,
means freaking business.
Yeah.
Like, I was just gonna say, and how changed he is after
oh
the drastic change with the water of life.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
God. Yeah. Long live the fighters. Ugh.
Ugh.
Which that's Arabic that he's speaking, and the actual translation is martyrs. Long live the martyrs. I remember learning about that, and I was like, "That's cool." And I understand
that's
why they changed it to
crazy.
fighters because,
That's crazy.
but
Yeah.
yeah. I was like, this could tick off some certain people. So when you're commercializing your product to make it more palatable for a mass market, I was like, it was a smart change. So
Yeah, there wasn't the same issues back in '65 when Herbert was
eh,
writing the book
right?
that
Yeah.
exist now.
Nope.
So.
Micah and
Yeah.
I were laughing in the car on the way back from
Damn.
the theater this afternoon because apparently Paul's Messiah journey is inspired. Herbert says a lot of it was inspired by Arthurian legend of King Arthur. And Micah was like, so yeah, there's the Christian version of the Messiah
Messiah.
story in King Arthur, and then Herbert was like, "Hey, let's do the same thing but Islamic instead of
Yeah.
Christian."
Yeah.
And
Because
Yeah.
King Arthur
I
has
was
a
like,
similar journey for like a holy war dynamic in sorts with,
Sure.
you know, with the
Yep.
with the Catholic Church being the leading belief system around it and all
gosh,
that. Damn.
wow,
Can you imagine actually facing that?
I
hell
would
no.
I
I
would
would
soil my
Dude,
shorts.
yes. I
I
would keep
would,
my
yeah.
pants
I would
and I would stand
without
there and I would drop to my knees and I'd be like,
without
okay, God.
Harkonnen powers, I would still levitate. I would just
You
levitate
would?
away. I would
Hmm.
levitate away.
Hmm.
Be like, goodbye.
Yes, yes.
Well, they combine, so this is a good example. So they harness the worms. They also harnessed the winds and the storms to their
Yeah.
advantage in battle. So this is
Yeah.
kind of an example of
Desert
how
power.
the Fremen manipulate
Dude.
nature to their advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of manipulation happening in this
Oh
story.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there is.
Oh,
Lots, lots, lots.
Seriously. Yeah, that was Jessica's intensity and the manipulation, her like level of just like and manipulation. I don't remember it being as intense in the book, so I was kind of like, ah,
yeah.
Yeah, that does seem a bit
this is
elevated in the
different.
movies.
Yeah.
I agree.
But it was, I mean, it was, she
Oh,
freaking
it's still
killed it
awesome.
and
I mean,
nailed
still
it.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did this happen in Dune 1
It
where
did. Jamis said it
Jameis
to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna
Jamis,
say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what
Jamis
James
says
said
it
to
to
Paul.
him.
Yep.
Jamis says it to Paul, and then Paul does his,
Yeah.
that,
Mhm.
and then they
So
part.
Paul
But I
adopted that
thought it was
thing from
neat that
Jamis.
Paul
Yeah.
says that and still does
He
his.
shall know our ways as though he's born to them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, kind of crazy. All
Yeah.
right, I'm going. This is the last slide I have.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
This was a great
How's
fight.
that?
It was a great fight
Yeah.
There's
Gosh.
some good choreography too. Yeah.
for sure.
Such good costumes and the freaking the fabrics on all of the Bene Gesserit and Florence's fits.
Yes. Princess Irulan.
Unreal. Oh my gosh, Princess
Best
Erlon.
dressed.
Yeah. Yeah,
Best
her
dress.
her fits were, especially that head thing, not
Yeah,
the metal one
the
she's wearing at
chainmail.
the end, but the
Oh,
bead no, not the
the
chainmail
bead
one. That
one,
one's amazing too, but the beaded one, that's like only
the gray beaded
they
one. Yeah.
yeah, the gray
Yep.
beaded one.
Ooh,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
man, that one's
Chainmail
so
one.
good.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
I saw
This
an
one.
interview with her.
Yep.
No, it's like this. All you can see is like her face right here. You can't see her hair. I saw like an interview with her talking about the chainmail outfit because all she's doing in those scenes is standing and watching.
Yeah.
And she's
Yeah.
like just talking about how she just had to stand in this literal chainmail for like hours a day
And it was
and how
heavy.
uncomfortable it was and it was heavy. And I was just like, oh man, that's funny. The things you don't think about.
Yeah. Being an actor is so glamorous.
Yeah, totally.
Every time I see this photo, I think about balsamic vinaigrette.
Yeah.
Okay,
But you
every
know
time you
what? I
see
wouldn't want to put
balsamic
that on my
vinaigrette
salad.
now,
I'll
I'm
tell you
gonna
that
think
right
about
now.
this.
I just
I don't
go,
want that
he's
anywhere near my
bathing.
salad.
He's literally bathing in balsamic vinaigrette right now.
Balsamic
That's
vinaigrette.
kind of insane.
Hey, how do we
Okay,
know
cool.
that that
Oh,
isn't
that's
what they put in there?
hilarious.
What?
How do we know that that isn't what they put in there for the set? It could be balsamic
I mean, it
vinaigrette.
might.
Could be.
It would sting the eyes. I would
You have to
imagine.
taste it.
Oh, yeah.
I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Oh,
Yeah.
that shot's so fresh.
Okay, one last question before I close it out. Top scene. I can answer this too, but top scene of Dune 2.
Ooh, yeah, y'all go first. Give me a minute.
All right, mine is, I actually mentioned this before, but it was the scene of Paul sitting on the dune and he's kind of reflecting on all that's happened up to that point. And he kind of is like speaking to partly to himself and partly to his father. And he says, "Father, I found my way."
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I love that because my favorite scene from the first one was when the quote that you had earlier, because I feel like to me that always connects me to the heart of God. Like that's what God is saying to me. And so it just kind of has like a cool connection and bond with that. So that's my favorite scene from Dune 2.
All right, I got mine. My favorite is it's early on. It's when Chani is teaching Paul how to properly sandwalk.
Oh,
That is
Oh my gosh.
that is
Yes.
just the
And the
scene for
love
me.
theme comes in.
And the
Oh,
cue from Hans Zimmer. I mean, like literally, like it is 2 seconds. Like it is 2-3 seconds, and it's like a 2-3 second moment. It is my all time favorite moment in the whole thing. It's after their dialogue exchange, like
you sandwalk
you
like
know,
a drunk lizard.
yeah, and Paul being like, "Oh, that's funny that you're telling me to do it this way because the anthropologist back home they said that you're
and
supposed
then he
to."
catches himself.
Yeah, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Never
Never
mind."
Never
So
mind.
then, like,
mind.
immediately after their dialogue, just the start of her. It's them moving side by side. The way
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
sequence is just those like 3 seconds and Hans Zimmer's cue right there. That is
Yeah.
when that's probably my first moment of having tears in my eyes for this experience. Yeah, for this film. For whatever reason, it just landed so well.
That was a good scene.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good moment.
I have mine.
Go for it.
Is when Paul is riding the worm.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Every time I see it, I mean, I've seen it twice. Every time I just get emotional. I don't know. It's just something about it. Like, yeah.
It's very primal. Like you feel like you're on that worm.
They did an excellent job with how they executed that sequence. I
Yeah.
paid attention to that the second time around. I was like,
Same.
they did
Same.
these shots to where you really feel like you are on that worm. Like the
Yep.
way
Yeah.
it was when he was going up the bigger dune. So he's already stood up and that cue was going on with the music
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's all victorious
it.
and fucking redemptive.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah,
when it's coming around that big dune and it starts and he tilts the worm and it starts rising up it, but there's this shot where it's like you feel like you are Paul and you just see that
Yeah.
worm going up and it's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah. You literally
Yeah.
feel the sand.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Especially in the IMAX theater, goddamn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously. Sand blasters.
I know we need a
Oh my
Dune theater
gosh.
experience that adds a little bit more
That would be
emotion.
good.
Could you
Yeah.
imagine?
Oh man,
For real.
that's so
That
funny.
is a
Yeah.
to shower, you scrub your ass with sand or whatever. That's what they say in
Yeah,
the
for
first
sure.
one.
Yeah. Like, what do
Yeah,
they
no,
say
I
about
think
this
I'm
place?
yeah, what do they say about this
Yeah,
place? They say to shower, you scrub your ass with
Ask for
sand.
sand.
yeah,
I
yep.
I think I'm with I mean, I the three things y'all just said are literally probably my top three favorite scenes. But Issa, I was that's what I was thinking. I was most excited about the worm writing for part
Mhm.
two.
Yeah,
Mhm.
About
yeah.
seeing that done. Because I honestly, when we were watching part one, and Liette leaves and she puts the thumper in the ground and she like her things out. I was just like, yeah, let's go. And then she gets stabbed. I totally forgot that happened. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh,
Yeah.
right. We
Yeah.
don't actually get to see
So you don't
worm
have to get
riding.
to see it. Yeah.
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 Now I just want to know how they get off.
That's
I
what I
know.
was
I've
wondering.
been wondering that too.
I was like, do
There's
they
a really
sort of
big
like,
ladder that hangs off the back of the
Yeah,
worm and they
yeah,
just climb down.
it's just like
Yeah.
how do you get off an airplane?
yeah.
Yeah.
Except like a municipal airport where you
Yeah.
actually get off from a ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like he's gonna let us in on that little secret how you get off of it on
Yeah.
the next
Hopefully.
film.
Next one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably take the hooks off and maybe it just goes back into the depths of the sand.
It's,
But the more I thought
and
about
then
that,
you
I was
kind of
like, it would kind of bury you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Velocity in the force. So I was like,
just bury you into
movie
this
magic, whatever. You're not supposed
movie
to ask
magic.
those questions or
Yeah.
think those thoughts. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
trust, man.
just trust.
Just trust.
Mhm.
Just
Just
trust the
trust.
process. Trust the
Trust the
process.
process.
Drink the worm piss. Trust the process.
Trust in Shai-Hulud.
Drink the water of life.
That's
You know
what
that's
that
going to
Reverend
be a
Mother
drink
said.
at
She was
bars.
like, drink it.
There's going to be a drink at bars called the Water of Life. They're going to do something with that. I guarantee.
Yes. Oh
I
my
don't know that they'll
gosh.
call it that. I wouldn't call it
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'd call it worm piss.
Depends on the bar.
Yeah. Yeah. Depends on the bar for sure.
Cool. Any last thoughts, guys?
Can't wait for 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can't wait
Yes.
for 3.
I'm
I don't know
curious
about
if
y'all's IMAX theater, but our IMAX theater, whenever Paul is facing off with the Emperor and Feyd in the final scene, and the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen or whatever her name is trying to tell him to calm down, and he's just like silence, and she sort of like stumbles
Oh.
back. Our theater
yeah.
was just like, yeah,
the theater
like,
cheered for that.
Really?
they
The theater didn't
cheered. It
cheer
was
for the
awesome.
Baron getting killed. The theater,
Yeah.
like they erupted for
For
Paul
that
saying
moment.
silence, and that was another
Yeah.
good moment. That was
Yeah.
another
That was
moment. I was
powerful.
just like,
yeah.
yeah,
I felt
Yeah.
that in my chest. I was like, oh,
yep.
It was like,
yeah,
sit
I better
down,
be
Reverend
quiet.
Mother.
I better
Yeah.
be quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You feel your butt clench like you're about to get swat. So,
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. She puckered for sure.
Well, so did Austin Butler's character.
Yeah.
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 I don't know that he puckered, but he definitely felt very he
Yep.
looked
Uncomfortable.
He felt
he looked
something.
amused.
Yeah.
He was like, "Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that was great. That was great."
Mm-hmm.
Our theater did not erupt. I kind of
Oh,
wish it
no.
did. There's a
Yeah.
lot of pent up emotion with that for obvious, just
Yep.
so yeah, it was really nice and satisfying to have him say silence because she just
Yeah.
She annoys.
she annoys.
She
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the whole order need to shut up.
Yeah.
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 They just
Well,
need to be
anytime they
quiet.
use the voice, it's kind of like, yo,
Yeah.
Yeah, the voice was scary in this one.
it's
Yeah.
In the
scary.
first one, it was just like a cool superpower, but when Jessica is like, "We'll see you there," all of us, I was like,
Yeah.
I
Some
do
Demon-
not
some
like
say
that.
the voice, others say Legion.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, "No, no,
All I'm saying.
no,
Yeah.
no."
I will
I
not
don't
I
like
will
the
not
voice
go.
anymore. Yeah,
I will not go.
the voice
I
is
will not go to the
suddenly,
south.
yeah, the voice is
Yeah.
suddenly
Stay
not
here.
cool. Yeah.
I stay here. Cool.
Jeez.
Well, thank you guys for joining in on this little conversation about
Yeah,
family.
thanks for
Yes, thanks
organizing.
for the
Absolutely.
opportunity and putting it all
Sure,
together.
for sure. And
Awesome.
yeah, until next time.
Yeah.
Until
Until
next
next
time.
Dune.